Hey guys, so I'm back in a park here, and I wanted to actually remake a video that I made, I think about 3 years ago. I just didn't like the way it turned out, and also I released the unedited version versus the edited version, so it's not really that great. And also, this is kind of an interesting video, something that I get asked about a lot when I teach trad classes and just from comments online. And I wanted to make a video where I had more of my face on the screen versus just my hands. So I'm going to remake this. There are a few things that maybe I do differently now, but overall, not much has really changed since I made this video. I kind of recommend the same exact things. And I also want to say that as far as like the exact numbers of cams and whatever else I mention, this will vary on your area. I'm going to try to recommend stuff that can work for almost anywhere, especially if you have a partner who's buying a rack as well as you. But there's going to be just variations for different areas, you know. I think what I'm going to recommend works for a lot of different places, but if you're in a specific spot like Yosemite or the creek where you just need a lot of gear, you know, this is going to be a bit of a minimal setup for you versus a place like Washington or Colorado or the East Coast, many places in the East Coast where this is a bit more of a all-inclusive list. So I use black diamond Camelots. There's any number of reasons why I use these cams, but the biggest one is kind of this is what I was taught with. You know, this is what my mentor showed me how to trad climb with. And that's in general, whoever you learn to trad climb from, you generally buy their gear that they use, whether that be Metolius, Wild Country, Black Diamond, whatever. I will say that the C4 Camelots in guiding, these are really good guide cams for a number of reasons. One is just they're tried and true. This is the old version. I have a newer one. Here we go. This is the new version of the C4 cams. There's a few differences. You can look them up online, but the main difference is these are lighter than the older version while still being about as durable. You can see right here they got this metal swage through the loop. Here's the old version, same deal, metal swage right there. There's really not much different other than the weight between these cams. I guess the stems are a little bit stiffer depending on the size of the head here. But I use black diamond cams. I have a triple rack of these old ones that right after I filled out the triple rack, they kind of introduced the newer ultralights and stuff. So I've just been using these. They're still in great shape. Some of the slings on some of these are looking a little tethered. I may send them in to get reslung, but overall they're still like really good cams. And what we look for with guiding cams versus what you might use in recreational land is something of durability is definitely a big one. If you work down in Joshua Tree and you're building trad anchors every day, you wear through gear quite a bit. So if you're planning on doing a lot of rock guiding, it's better to go with the more burly equipment. Other things that I like about these cams are the stiff stem. So that makes them really great for guiding because generally we're working with clients that may have never even removed a cam before. So if you have this in the rock and then all you tell them is, you know, press the trigger out, slot it out, it's easier to work with for people that aren't as accustomed to this equipment than something like a totem cam or an alien cam or these old X4s, you know, with the flexi stem. Just the rock holds the stem a bit more firm, or it holds the head a bit more firm, and so it just can make it a bit harder for new people to take these out of the rock. So that's why I've stuck with black diamond cams. Wild Country makes really good cams as well that are great for guiding. I still may pull out my totems or my aliens, you know, for specific routes or for specific clients. I work with a lot of advanced clients, and so they they may even know how to place gear, and they're just using me for a really complex route. So that's when I can pull out my more fancy stuff if I want it for specific routes, but for the most part, I just go with black diamonds, especially working with new folks. Again, that's all my preference, and so you're gonna see that throughout my rack. All right, so let's move on to a good beginner rack. So this is cams. There's about 7 cams in here, and then you also have stoppers. So I think both of these are good for beginner racks. Another thing that you may see, especially around the East Coast, are tri-cams being thrown around. I'm not sure if tri-cams are really the best to put beginners on, but that may just be my preference. There may be other guides that pull them out no matter what. So you may see tri-cams laying around. I don't have my tri-cams with me for this video, so I'm just I'll put in some pictures of them in the screen right here so you can see what I mean. As far as stoppers go, I have a small selection of 5 right here, and this may be me dialing in. I think it is nice to at least show people or have a set of normal stoppers in your rack, and that would be like you could use black diamond set. I think it comes in number 4 to 13 if I remember right, and that is a good starting set of stoppers. But I also think it's really nice to have these offset stoppers. So if you don't know what these are, they're tapered in this profile where it's smaller here and wider here, whereas more classic stoppers stay the same shape in this profile. And because of that, it just allows them to fit in specific cracks, and in my opinion, they're a bit easier to find spots to slot them in than regular stoppers. And so this is like black diamond set. They come with a set of 5. In the color scheme, it'd be number 7 to 11 right here. And I like the smaller set of stoppers for one. And then I also like just every single one of these has had some thought put into it. And I can almost, like, if I've used my red one somewhere else, I can usually find a spot for the gold one and moving up. So it's not like once you lose your red, you're kind of out of a size. You can still find your way around with a different stopper. I do actually own 2 sets of these, which I may pull out and bring 2 sets depending on the climb. But again, mostly when I'm guiding, I'm going to try to place cams because those are easier for clients to clean. You're also going to want to buy a nut tool, not just for popping these guys out of the rock, but also this thing could be used for fishing a cam that's jammed a little too deep, or cleaning a crack, so that way you can get better purchase with your placements. They're not that expensive, and they are pretty useful for different things. Different nut tools are out there. This one I just bought along with this set of stoppers, so this is a BD nut tool. I do really like the ones with the clipper right here, so that way you don't have to have a separate carabiner. I also kind of like Metolius's nut tools that have different hex bits all along the spine, so that way you could actually tighten up the head of a bolt if need be, and I think that's kind of a neat feature. The way how I tend to rack these is I just clip this right here as part of my stoppers, so that way I just have the whole bundle right here, and I can always take this off and give it to whoever's cleaning the pitch. It's also pretty nice if you're doing a long rock route for each person just to have their own nut tool. That way you don't forget to switch it off. Everyone has it. It's lightweight. It doesn't really get in the way. You can just bring your own nut tool. You can get 2 of them. Okay, moving back. Rack of cams. So this is kind of a good starter rack of cams right here. It's 7 cams. I'm just going to rattle off the sizes. 0.3 right here. 0.4. Set those down. 0.5, 0.75, 1, 2, and 3. So overall that size range is from 0.3 to 3. And you can see roughly the different range right there. This is also when many companies, especially Black Diamond, where they repeat the colors. So it goes blue to blue. Any cam smaller than this 0.3, here's my finger for scale. Any cam smaller than that 0.3 is what we usually refer to as a micro cam. And we don't really have big cams, but I guess you could say any cam bigger than this number 3 is referred to as a bigger cam. Strategy plays in here. If you have enough money to buy 2 sets of these, then you don't really need any strategy. But if you're working, if you have to, save up money to buy your first set of cams, that's a great set as a, for rock climbing, beginning trad climbing. And what you can do is buddy up with someone who has that same amount of cams, and then you have a double rack right there. Only one of you needs to buy a set of stoppers, because you just need the one set of stoppers. But you can work with your friends to buy cams while you build up your own rack at the start. That's something that we've all done. I've done it, and it really helps with getting out there and climbing rather than just working all the time to save up money for these things. Okay, so let's say you bought that set of cams, you've been climbing for a year or whatever, you want to expand your rack. Kind of the idea is that now that you've been climbing for a year, you kind of know what you want, or it would be good to have a double of this, a double of that, for your specific area. Or if you're in Indian Creek, then you know that you want to have 8 number 1s for your crack climb. So the next step I would say for doubling up is the more popular sizes. And I tend to go with this setup right here, where I'll start doing doubles of 0.5 right here, doubles of 0.75, 1 and 2. So really the only cams I'm not doubling up with right now are 0.3, 0.4, and number 3. And this is actually kind of a common rack that you'll see me out with. If I have to build trad anchors and it's like an easy climb, I may bring this double set. If I'm doing a longer multi-pitch route, I may bring this with like a few extra micro cams. This is actually kind of a common rack for me. I guess you could say it's just my standard rack for a route that maybe I'm not as familiar with the gear, and I know it's easy climbing with trad anchors. I may go with this rack. I may go even if there's sport anchors or bolted anchors. It's a pretty versatile rack. So after you've doubled up on those main sizes, if you're still looking at expanding out, that's when we can move into smaller gear, and then possibly a larger piece like a number 4. So the number 4, it comes in handy. You don't use it a huge, depending on your routes, if you get really into off-width climbing, you're gonna want a ton of these, and a 5 and a 6 and a 7. But this is still kind of an auxiliary piece for many areas. And in many areas, a lot of people, this is their biggest cam that they own. So they could have 1, they could have 2 number 4s, but this is as big as the climbing they get and the amount of use they get. So that could be where you top out. I personally own bigger cams, which I don't use a huge amount in my particular climbing, but they do come in handy for specific routes. And that's sort of what we're getting into now, is cams for specific routes, like micro cams. So this is the 0.2 and the 0.1. These aren't, these specific models aren't made anymore, but I really like them. Here you go. Here's my other 0.3. It's also an X4. So you can see 0.3, 0.2, and then 0.1 on the end right here. So these are all roughly what you could consider micro cams, especially the 0.2 and the 0.1. Black Diamond makes the Z4 nowadays, which is essentially the same as this, but they have different numbers. You also have Wild Country makes the Dragonfly, or is it Wild Country? What company makes the Dragonfly? The Dragonfly cams are pretty boss, so you could definitely invest in those for good micro cams. Essentially what I'm looking for in micro cams are small, obviously the small lobes. I generally want a bit more of a flexible stem, because these tend to be a bit more of a bit more tenuous placements. So flexible stem is nice, but it makes it easy to shove the cam in, but the flexible stem also helps keep the cam from walking after you clip the rope to it. So it does make the cam a bit more fiddly and hard to place. I have often used Alien cams as my micro cams. I have a whole review comparing Alien cams to these cams, actually. And that's the one drawback to a lot of these things, is kind of it's hard to fiddle these things in. And so if you can get your hands on them, a rack of Black Diamond C3 cams are really nice, because they're really stiff stem and they just shoot right in. but then they walk a bit more. And they're also not made anymore, so a lot of people will not sell their C3s. I'm not selling my C3s. So Black Diamond kind of created this new thing with the Z4, where you're supposed to pull the trigger and it gets stiff, and you can shove it in, and then when you release the trigger, it gets loose. I mean, that seems like it's pretty good to me. I own a couple of Z4s, but they're not on my main rack, and so far they work pretty well. Anyway, tangent over. So you could do a 0.2, a 0.1, you could get a 0 cam, which is a bit smaller. And then, unless you're doing some more specialty climbing, that's really all you need, is just those 2 or 3 micro cams on the bottom. And same deal, like the number 4 comes in handy for a number of things, but when you get into 5, 6, 7, all those are kind of more specialty cams that you don't use as much. So you'll kind of know what you want to climb after you get to that point. All right, so that's kind of the cool stuff, the cams and the nuts that you use to start climbing. There are some other things like quick draws. So let me just talk about these things real fast. These are kind of my do everything quick draws except for sport climbing. As long as you don't sport climb on these things, they last quite a while. I'll use these for multi-pitch sport climbing. These are my main guiding quick draws too. And I've treated them really well. Let's see, now the tag says 2016 on it. So this quick draw is from 2016, but there's barely any burrs right here, and the metal's still in pretty good shape. Yeah, so as long as you don't sport climb on your stuff, it works pretty well. You wouldn't really want to use your sport climbing quick draws on your cams, or for trad climbing in general, because sport climbing quick draws are generally heavier, they're bulkier, they just take up more room on your harness, and a lot of the times you use them for this right here. You clip them to the sling on your cam. And so if I use my quick draw that I've been sport climbing on and falling all over with because it's my proj draw, it develops quite a bit of burrs up here in the bolt area. And those burrs will cause bad things to your slings if you were to fall on this piece, or even just rubbing up and down while you're climbing up. So I know it's like, again, a lot more money, and if you have some better looking or newer sport quick draws, you can probably get away with them, but it isn't bad to have a few trad climbing draws. You could bring out these sport draws. You could also just bring out alpine quick draws. That is how some people deal with it. They have their sport draws for sport climbing and alpine draws for trad climbing, and that's a great system. I do enjoy having a few of these just normal sport quick draws out with me in case I place a stopper, or just for smaller extensions. And it does make the gear easier to clean for clients because they don't have the giant sling they got to deal with. I'd say in your rack, it's nice to have about 6 of these sport draws, 6 to 8. The other one is the alpine draw, or trad draw, or whatever people want to call it. It's pretty simple. It's 2 carabiners. I go for lightweight ones. These are Mad Rock carabiners. These used to be the lightest weight ones on the market. I remember picking these up in the store and being like amazed with how lightweight they are. Now they're just kind of like midweight. But these are also, you know, quick draws I've had since 2016, 2014, whatever. So it's just how it goes. This is a Black Diamond sling. I use a lot of Black Diamond stuff. This is their shoulder length sling because it can go over your shoulder like that. It's also known as a 60 centimeter sling or a 24-inch sling. All these different numbers mean the same sling. You could just say the yellow sling from Black Diamond. And this one is your standard trad draw length. So you could just buy 10 of these and put them together, and that's all you need for quick draws while trad climbing, and you don't have to bring the sport draws with you. I like having both personally, but I'd say a selection of 8 to 12 of these is really nice to have. Of course, you can also just buy like 4 of these and have your buddy buy 4 again, and then you can put them together to make 8. A lot of companies are selling these as pre-packaged deals now, like a set of 3 or 4 or whatever, so you can just get those. And you know, you could have a pretty bomber rack just by having 0.3 to 3 and 4 alpine draws, maybe 2 sport draws, and then have your buddy with the same amount of gear, and you guys can climb a lot. Well, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I try to make a good amount of content to put out there about different things, and I'm happy that I could remake this video to make it better. And I'd like to hear any differences you guys prefer or any other gear you'd like to have a deep dive about. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. There goes Holly arm camp. There's Holly. There's a bunch of goats.